Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 18, texts 17 through 20. Did I do something?
No, I couldn't hear any volume from your side. I didn't know it was controlled from there.
It's all here. I have so much power.
Krishna be with you always.
So we can read. Okay, so wrong way here. 16 through 20. So we can do 16 together because Anushtup. Easy. Punar Gadam Swam Adaya Punar Gadam Swam Adaya Brahmayantam Abhikshnashaha Brahmayantam Abhikshnashaha Abhyadhavat Dhari Kruddha Abhyadhavat Dhari Kruddha Sangrambhad Dashta Dachadam Samrambhad Dashta Dachadam Punargadam Swamadaya Brahmayantam Abhikshnashaha Abhyadhavadhari Kruddha Samrabhadashtadachadam Punargadam Swamadaya Brahmayantam Abhikshnashaha Abhyadhavadhari Kruddha Sangrambhadashtadachadam. Others, please. Synonyms. Punaha, again. Gadam, mace. Svam, is. Adaya, having taken. Brahmayantam, brandishing. Abhikshnasha, repeatedly. Abhyadhavat, rushed to meet. Hari, the personality of Godhead. Kruddha, angry. Samrambhat, in rage. Dashta, bitten. Dachadam, his lip. The person of translation and purport, well, translation. The personality of Godhead now exhibited his anger and rushed to meet the demon who bit his lip in rage, took up his mace again, and began to repeatedly brandish it about. Responsively, please. The personality of Godhead now exhibited his anger and rushed to meet the demon who bit his lip in rage, took up his mace again, and began to repeatedly brandish it about. Excuse me. Text 17. Tatascha gadayaratim dakshinasyam bhuvi prabhu ajagne satumam saumya gadaya kovidodhanat. Then, with his mace, the Lord struck the enemy on the right of his brow. But since the demon was expert in fighting, O gentle Vidura, he protected himself by a maneuver of his own mace. So he blocked it. The Lord was aiming for his temple, and Hiranyaksha was able to block it. Text 18. Evam gadabhyam gurvibhyam haryaksho harirevacha jighishaya susam ramthav anyonyam abhijagnatahu. In this way, the demon Haryaksha and the Lord, the personality of Godhead, struck each other with their huge maces, each enraged and seeking his own victory. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Haryaksha is another name for Hiranyaksha, the demon. So now you know. If you get initiated and your name is Haryaksha Das, problem. Text 19.
Dirty hair.
Tayos pradastigma gadhata yangayo katashravaghrana vivriddha manyavo vichitramargams charator jigishaya vyabhadilayam ivasushimnor shushminor mridaha. There was keen rivalry between the two combatants. Both had sustained injuries on their bodies from the blows of each other's pointed maces, and each grew more and more enraged at the smell of blood on his person. In their eagerness to win, they performed maneuvers of various kinds, and their contest looked like an encounter between two forceful bulls for the sake of a cow. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here the earth planet is called Ila. The earth was formerly known as Ilavrtavarsha, and when Maharaj Parikshit ruled the earth, it was called Bharatavarsha. Actually, Bharatavarsha is the name for the entire planet, but gradually Bharatavarsha has come to mean India. As India has recently been divided into Pakistan and Hindustan, Similarly, the earth was formerly called Ilavrtavarsha, but gradually as time passed, it was divided by national boundaries. And text 20. Daityasya yagya Vasyamaya grihita varaha tanor mahatmana Kaurabhya mahyam dvishator vimardanam didrikshuragad rishibhir vritaswarat. O descendant of Kuru, Brahma, the most independent demigod of the universe, accompanied by his followers, came to see this terrible fight for the sake of the world between the demon and the personality of Godhead who appeared in the form of a boar. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The fight between the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the demon is compared to a fight between bulls for the sake of a cow. The earth planet is also called Go, or cow. As bulls fight between themselves to ascertain who will have union with the cow, there is always a constant fight between the demons and the Supreme Lord, or his representative for supremacy over the earth. Here the Lord is significantly described as Yagyavayava. One should not consider the Lord to have the body of an ordinary boar. He can assume any form, and he possesses all such forms eternally. It is from him that all other forms are emanated. This boar form is not to be considered the form of an ordinary hog. His body is actually full of yajna, or worshipful offerings. Yajna, sacrifices, are offered to Vishnu. Yajna means the body of Vishnu. His body is not material, therefore he should not be taken to be an ordinary boar. Brahma is described in this verse as Swarat. Actually, full independence is exclusive to the Lord himself, but as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, every living entity has a minute quantity of independence. Each and every one of the living entities, each and every one of the living entities within this universe has this minute independence, but Brahma, being the chief of all living entities, has a greater potential of independence than any other. He is the representative of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and has been assigned to preside over universal affairs. All other demigods work for him. Therefore, he is described here as Swarat. He is always accompanied by great sages and transcendentalists, all of whom came to see the bullfight between the demon and the Lord. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Jatkripatamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. The verses again. The personality of Godhead now exhibited his anger and rushed to meet the demon who bit his lip in rage, took up his mace again, and began to repeatedly brandish it about. Then, with his mace, the Lord struck the enemy on the right of his brow. But since the demon was expert in fighting, O gentle Vidura, he protected himself by a maneuver of his own mace. In this way, the demon Haryaksha and the Lord, the personality of Godhead, struck each other with their huge maces, much enraged and seeking, each enraged and seeking his own victory. There was keen rivalry between the two combatants. Both had sustained injuries on their bodies from the blows of each other's pointed maces, and each grew more and more enraged at the smell of blood on his person. In their eagerness to win, they performed maneuvers of various kinds and their contest looked like an encounter between two forceful bulls for the sake of a cow. O descendant of Kuru, Brahma, the most independent demigod of the universe, accompanied by his followers, came to see the terrible fight for the sake of the world between the demon and the personality of Godhead, who appeared in the form of a boar. So there are a couple things here. One is this interesting comparison between the two bulls seeking the affections of a cow. I don't know if anyone here has ever seen bulls actually fighting with each other. Anybody? Let me see hands. I have. It's something to see. It's fierce and a little frightening. I remember once I was when I was staying at an ashram in Northern California. There are a couple of bulls that would get into scraps all the time. One with the oldest of the bulls, it was Dharma, and he was a little bigger than, they were all miniature zebus, but Dharma was a little bigger than the other bulls. So he was naturally dominant. Oh, and he was older. So he was naturally quite dominant most of the time. There were a couple of bulls that would take him on, though, and one was this younger bull named Kishore. Kishore had scary horns. And one time I saw them getting into a fight, literally a dust-up. Just like in the cartoons, there was like this cloud of dust swirling around them as the two of them fought, and it was noisy. And one devotee went to see if he could break them up, and all of a sudden I saw him go flying. Oh! And this wasn't a young guy. This devotee was a couple of years younger than me, so it wasn't a kid. And it's pretty wild. So here, this battle is compared to two bulls fighting over the affections of a cow. So this is a fierce fight. We're not messing around here. They had wounds each had wounds on their bodies inflicted by the other, including the Lord. And with each blow, each became more enraged than before. So the fight became fiercer and fiercer. And then we have the discussion of Brahma as Swarat. Swarat is usually applied, as Srila Prabhupada points out in his purport, to the Supreme Lord. True independence is something that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead has. But here, by comparison to the other devatas, Brahma is Swarat. He's more independent than the others. So he could go watch with his retinue, his posse. What was that? There was a TV show. Wasn't there a TV show about somebody had it? What did they call it? What was that show called? I never saw it. But I remember hearing something about it. Anyway, it was something like that. So he went with his whole crew and watched. But for me, the larger point in these verses is the reminder that this is the personality of Godhead. This is not just some magical, gigantic boar, or as the Gurukula boys used to say when we would go on hikes, boar pig. Wonder if we're going to see any boar pigs if we go on a hike in the mountains. We're going to see if we any boar pigs today. Oh, Prabhu, there's a boar pig over there. So he's not an ordinary boar pig. Prabhupada says not an ordinary hog, not an ordinary boar. But this is the transcendental body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so This brings me back to a verse that I come to quite frequently lately, and that's in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I thought we'd take a look at a little bit of the purport, and then take a look at another verse and a little bit of that purport. Then we will have run out of time. So this is text 9 in chapter 4. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mamiti. So Arjuna, Krishna says to Arjuna, if someone actually knows the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities, they don't have to come back to this material world again, but instead they attain Krishna's eternal abode. So Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport, one who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting his present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after much trouble and many, many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is risk of returning again to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning again to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita it is stated that the Lord has many, many forms and incarnations. Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadi, Anantarupam. How many? Anadi. They're beginningless. There's no beginning to them, no end to them. There's no counting them. One way to translate the word Maya, Maya for illusion, Maya for material energy, is counting or measuring. So if we think we can measure the extent of the Lord's glories, that's Maya. If we think we can count them, all we can do is hear, recite, and appreciate. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, there's still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers. So this is pretty much the crux of our practice, trying to understand the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and Krishna's activities, so we can appreciate them. And the more we appreciate them, the better we'll be able to hear. And how we come to understand the transcendental glories of the Lord, how we best come to understand the transcendental nature of his appearance and his activities is, I don't know, anybody have a guess, a wild guess? Bingo. Thank you, Daniel. Hearing. We come to hear, we come to learn about the transcendental nature. We come and we progressively become convinced by of the transcendental nature of the Lord's appearance and activities by hearing about it. Rukmini had never met Krishna, but she'd heard about him. And based on what she heard, she decided, there's no one else for me but him. Not settling for second best. Krishna is called Advitiya. One of his names is Advitiya. Advitiya means one without a second. He has no rival. Nobody can compete with him. Advitiya, it comes from the same word as Dvaita, Advaita. But here it means one without a second. no rival. There's not even a close second, right? So, there's a verse in the first canto, 12th chapter of the first canto. This is the beginning of beginning of chapter 12, the chapter about the birth of King Parikshit. And so Shaunaka Rishi, speaking on behalf of all the sages gathered at Naimisharanya, was asking Sutta Goswami, okay, we want to hear about King Parikshit. We want to hear about his birth. We want to hear about his activities, because we know this will elevate us. So he says, Taridam shrotam ichham ogaditum yadiman yase bruhi nashradhananam yasya jnanam adatchakuchuka. My dear Shuka, we all respectfully want to hear about this appearance and activity of Shukadev Goswami, of King Parikshit, to whom Shukadev gave transcendental knowledge. So please speak on this matter. And this is a really nice purport. Can't not share it. Shukadev Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge to Maharaj Parikshit during the remaining 7 days of his life, and Maharaj Parikshit heard him properly, just like an ardent student. Ardent student. This word ardent will show up again in this purport. I'm going to focus on that in a minute. The effect of such bona fide hearing and chanting of Srimad Bhagavatam were equally shared by the hearer and the chanter. Both of them benefited. Out of the 9 transcendental means of devotional service to the Lord prescribed in the Bhagavatam, either all of them, or some of them, or even one of them, are equally beneficial if properly discharged. Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami were serious performers of the first 2 important items, namely the process of hearing and the process of chanting and the process of hearing. Therefore, both of them were successful in their laudable attempt. Transcendental realization is attained by such serious hearing and chanting, and not otherwise. And then he talks about other so-called forms of spiritual realization. And I'll just move on a little bit. The sage recited Srimad Bhagavatam in devotion, and the king heard him properly. One should not become a victim of unauthorized advertisements made by some bogus representative of Vedic knowledge. The sages of Naimisharanya were very respectful in hearing about Maharaj Parikshit because of his receiving knowledge from Shukadev Goswami by means of ardent hearing. Prabhupada italicized this, by means of ardent hearing. Ardent hearing from the bona fide spiritual master.
Jai Shri Bhakti Ki.
Ardent hearing from the bona fide spiritual master is the only way to receive transcendental knowledge, and there's no need for medical performances or occult mysticism for miraculous effects. The process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired result. Anybody have any guesses as to what ardent mean? When we say ardent hearing, what do we mean?
Serious.
Serious. Any other synonyms for ardent? Sincere. They're nice. Serious, sincere.
Attentive.
They're getting there. I'm sorry?
Attentive.
Attentive, part of it, yeah.
It's strong. It's stern.
Very strong. You want to hear some synonyms?
Yes.
Passionate, avid, fervent, zealous, wholehearted, eager, intense, fierce, flaming, emotional, ardent hearing. Ardor is what when we fall in love, what we're feeling is ardor. We can't think about anything or anyone else, right? Anybody had that experience? Anybody ever had a crush, fallen in love? I have. Way too many times. There was a TV show in the early 60s maybe, called The Life and Loves of Dobie Gillis or something like that. It was about this nice but hapless guy who was always falling in love with every cute girl in his class. Meanwhile, he had this one girl who was crazy in love with him, Zelda Gilroy. And he never paid her any attention because I guess she wasn't as flashy as the other girls. And the other girls, Dobie, he's a nice boy, but we don't want him. Ardent hearing. It means you can't help but hear. Srimad Bhagavatam class, Bhagavad Gita class, gotta go here, gotta go here. Some Hari Katha going on somewhere, gotta go here. This is the cure for all the other hearing that we do. Right now, what do we hear about? If you open a news app on your phone, first thing's going to come up, Ukraine. Second thing, probably today, Academy Awards. I saw that on my phone. So I'm assuming tonight is the Academy Awards ceremony. I don't, other than that, I don't know anything. We'll hear about Vladimir Putin, Volodymyr Zelensky, Joe Biden, Ted Cruz, Ketanji Brown Jackson. We'll hear all these names, and we'll hear about all these things that are going on in the world, and they drive us crazy. There's a whole podcast about getting offline. A little irony there, right? Podcast online about getting offline. But intensely, having an intense desire to hear about Krishna, that's how we come to understand the transcendental nature of Krishna's activities, his appearance and his activities. Not any other way. This is how we do it. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that we should organize our lives in such a way that we progressively remember the personality of Godhead at every step of life. That means at this moment, I'm having more intense memory of remembrance of Krishna than I did a moment ago, and tomorrow even greater, and the day after that even greater. We should be making progress. We should be chugging along. I'm not a flashy personality. I'm not terribly charismatic, haven't done a lot of big things, but if there is anything to my credit, I kept plugging every day over the last 50-odd years, 52, going on 53 years, I guess now. Just kept plugging away at my sadhana. It's nothing to write home about, but somehow or other, it keeps me alive. So that's as big an ambition as most of us can have, is to be steady in our practice, especially steady in our practice of hearing, chanting, and remembering about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Srila Prabhupada has organized these opportunities for us to do just that. I'll stop here and entertain any discussion. Jai Gopal?
Was Dobie jealous Bob Denver?
No. Bob Denver was his sidekick, Maynard G. Krebs, who was a beatnik, or a beatnik wannabe.
Okay.
Okay?
Are there any special qualities to the blood of the Supreme Personality of Godhead?
It's transcendental. It's all a game. This is a Leela. We don't need to become too concerned about this welling of anger, because it's a play. They're acting. We read that a couple weeks ago, right? This is all a setup. The Lord assured the Kumaras, no worries, this is a game. It's a game. We're going to play. So, as far as I understand, Ordinarily, the Lord doesn't have any blood unless he wants to display it, like here, or on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Grandfather Bhishma was able to see the Lord, little wounds, arrow wounds and stuff on the Lord's body. Is that okay? Anything else?